My name is Daniel Weir. I am 35 years old. I run a small marine repair shop on the edge of the Ashley River in Charleston. 6 weeks ago, my father died of a heart attack in his own kitchen, and 2 weeks after his funeral, my wife handed me a vacation brochure and told me grief does not pay for anything. What she did not know was that my father had already protected me from exactly this moment, years before it ever arrived. Before I tell you what happened next, please hit like and subscribe, drop your city and local time below. I love knowing where you are listening from. Now let me take you back to a man in an old truck nobody thought was worth anything, and a piece of land he never once talked about. My father, Arthur Weir, drove a 1998 Ford Ranger with a bad muffler and a Bondo patch on the tailgate, the kind of truck my wife Michelle called an embarrassment. He lived in a small house on B Street, free and clear, and he never once bragged about anything he owned. He believed money was not for showing off. Used to go fishing with him as a boy on a piece of marshland out past John's Island, land he bought back in the 80s for almost nothing, back when nobody wanted property that flooded twice a year. Every Sunday he made a low country boil, shrimp spread on newspaper across his kitchen table, the smell of Old Bay and river water hanging in the small house. He would call me every week, warm and steady, never once sounding hurt when Michelle refused to come. "Bring her if she wants," he would say, and when she rolled her eyes at the invitation, he simply said, "Suit yourselves." My father told me once, a loud man spends his whole life proving something. A quiet man already has. I did not understand it then. I understood it completely months later. What I did not know was that behind the peeling paint of that little house, he had already been planning for a moment he hoped would never come. My father died on a Tuesday morning in late June, sudden, coffee still brewing on the counter. The funeral was small, held at the Baptist church he attended every other Sunday, the way he wanted it. Neighbors brought real food, shrimp and grits, a smoked pork butt that fed 40 people. His old truck sat untouched in the driveway for a week because none of us could bring ourselves to move it. Michelle wore black, hugged the right people, said the right sentence to enough relatives that it started sounding rehearsed. That night at home, she told me to take whatever time I needed. I believed her completely. 2 weeks later, sitting on the couch with grief pressing down on me like the Charleston heat outside, she dropped a glossy brochure for the Amalfi Coast into my lap. "Grief does not pay for anything," she said, and walked back to the kitchen like she had said nothing at all. That is the exact phrase people use once they have decided your pain has a price tag attached to it. I did not know yet that she had already started spending money she did not have, based on a fortune she had not yet confirmed existed. 10 days later, I came home to find Michelle at the kitchen table with a legal pad covered in circled numbers. She had learned from a neighbor at the funeral that my father owned marshland out on John's Island, land about to be rezoned for commercial development. That October, she had already calculated it was worth $2, maybe $3 million. She wanted a new car. She wanted kitchen countertops replaced. Within weeks, she brought home a listing for a $2 million house on Daniel Island, her handwriting already scrawled in the margins. Perfect for us. When I told her Thomas Vance, my father's attorney of nearly 30 years, had not told us anything specific yet, she told me flatly that I was acting like a grease monkey who owed loyalty to a cheap, dead father instead of the wife who deserved a real life. What she did not know was that Thomas Vance had already been quietly finalizing something behind closed doors that same week, something my father had set in motion long before he ever got sick. She was building an entire future on a number she had not earned the right to know yet. On a Thursday night in August, standing on the porch with the trash cans at my feet, Michelle told me that if I would not share the inheritance and give her the life she deserved, she would divorce me and take half of it anyway. I stood there in the heat and heard, for the first time in 4 years, exactly who she had been the whole time. I wish this had been different. I wish she had been the kind of wife who grieved beside me, instead of one who calculated my father's death in dollars before his truck had even left the driveway. I wish she had loved the quiet, careful man my father raised instead of the number she assumed came attached to his name. But wishes do not undo 4 years of blindness. The truth does. I did not cry that night. I thought I would. And instead, something in me went still and clear, like a fever finally breaking. I drove out to my father's land on John's Island alone the next evening, sat by the water where I used to fish with him as a boy, and let myself grieve fully. For him, and for the marriage I now understood, had already ended long before Michelle said the words out loud. At 11:50 that night I called Thomas Vance directly, and he told me plainly what I had suspected for weeks. My father, years earlier, had placed the Johns Island property and the majority of his assets into a trust that named me as sole beneficiary, structured specifically so that no spouse, current or future, would ever have automatic claim to it. He had done it quietly, the same year Michelle and I got married, without ever once mentioning it to either of us. Just after midnight, I signed the paperwork, confirming my role as trustee, formally beginning the transfer my father had arranged years before he ever needed it. 12:03 in the morning. I am 35 years old. I am, for the first time since that Thursday on the porch, no longer confused about where I stand. Across town, Michelle was almost certainly still browsing listings for the house on Daniel Island, confident that a fortune was simply waiting for her signature. She would find out within days that the land she had already spent in her mind had never legally been reachable to her at all. I filed for divorce that following week, citing irreconcilable differences, and quietly informed my attorney about everything Michelle had said on that porch, along with the legal pad and printed listings she had left in plain sight. When her own attorney requested financial disclosure on my father's estate, the trust documents came back, showing exactly what Thomas had told me: land held in an irrevocable trust, established years before our marriage, entirely outside the reach of equitable distribution. Michelle called me 11 times that Wednesday. I let everyone go to voicemail. When she finally reached me, her voice had none of the certainty it carried on that porch. She asked how this was possible. I told her my father had understood people better than any of us gave him credit for. She looked at me the way she always had, like I was still the quiet man who would eventually give in. I was not. I had not been since the night she told me, "Grief does not pay for anything." My father used to say, "A quiet man has already proven himself and does not need to raise his voice to be understood." I always thought that was simply his way of explaining an old truck and a peeling house. I understand now he meant something far larger. He meant that real protection does not announce itself. It waits quietly until the moment it is needed most. Michelle's divorce settlement left her with nothing beyond what she brought into the marriage herself. Thomas Vance still manages the trust today, exactly as my father designed it. As for me, I still have the land, the truck nobody could bring themselves to move, and a version of peace I did not expect to find this soon. I think of my father every time I drive past that marsh at John's Island, and I think, some men spend their whole lives being underestimated, so the people who matter most are protected when it counts. If you have ever discovered someone's true character only after loss stripped everything else away, I want to hear your story. Tell me in the comments. And if this one moved you, subscribe to Dad's Revenge Tales. There is more where this came from.